Welcome into the Tottenham Depot. I am your host, Andrew. You can follow me at Astetka. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. This is episode 181, coming to you on a little bit of a weird schedule. Thanks to listeners for bearing with us. And my travel schedule had to go out of town for some family business. But we are back to talk about the end of the season, which is it just happened. It's all of a sudden here. The end of the season is upon us. We start by throwing it out to Caroline. She is at CG Stefko. Caroline, what's going on with you on this fine Thursday?
Not too much, enjoying all this free time I suddenly have now that the season is over, and I'm just fully focused on American soccer, which is kind of nice. But you know who else is on a weird schedule? Spurs men's players. Those poor guys.
Yeah, no kidding.
They've been through the ringer this week.
Immediately jumping down to Melbourne for a, I keep calling it a preseason friendly. It is certainly not that. It is a postseason friendly that has already happened. We'll briefly touch on that, but it's very, very unimportant. So we're not going to talk too much about that. Scott is also with us at Scott G. Bird. Scott, what's going on with you, my friend?
Chilling. Just got back from a 6-year-old T-ball game, riveting stuff. Happy to be able to talk Spurs with you all, and I'll say I hope the men's team has some grandiose mini vacation planned for that squad after they wrap up their duties, and maybe that's something we wouldn't hear about, right? But if I'm if I'm Postecoglou, we may have been talking off the air about certain people, but if I'm Postecoglou, I am making sure that Daniel Levy gives those boys an all expenses paid vacation somewhere in Australia before they come back and fire it all back up.
Yeah, we may talk a little bit of Pochettino a little bit later, but we did mean Postecoglou, of course. Oh man, it's been a week, my friends. It has been a week. Listen, you guys are going to be the ones that have to kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting on recapping these final 2 games of the season on both the men's and women's side. I've watched them, but very distractedly. Let's start by talking about Tottenham Hotspur 3, Sheffield United 0. This was a nice way to close the season, obviously. A couple of goals from Dejan Kulusevski, a goal from Pedro Porro, an absolute banger of a goal from Pedro Porro, which I guess that's all he seems to score ever, is just bangers upon bangers. But this was, I think, about as comprehensive of a performance as you could possibly ask for against a already well-relegated team. You're talking about pretty much matching XG with goals, 3.16, 3 goals, 76% possession, just kind of grabbed control. There was a few moments in the first 5 or 10 minutes where it looked a little bit airy, but from there on out, Caroline, this was just a dominant performance and obviously securing 5th place and, Europa League for next season. So what was your just kind of overall takeaway from this one?
Yeah, I think it was just a nice way to end the season after all of the kind of angst that we've been through in recent weeks. This didn't feel like a game where there was any real jeopardy of losing. I will say it's great that we did kind of, get close to that XG because their keeper was having a pretty good game, as he tends to do against us. But we got the clean sheet, and that's what I'm focusing on because I really didn't think we would get another one before the end of the season. So congrats, boys.
Yeah, to your point, 9 shots on target and only 3 of them go in. So that means 6 saves were made. It was a little bit of performance there. Scott, what about you, man? Was there anything glaring to take from this one? I mean, I guess the only kind of point is we talk about Dejan Kulusevski scoring a brace, and he kind of played through the middle in this game, which is a little different. He kind of, again, Ange is showing us not only his plan B, but his plan C in the wake of weeks and weeks of trying to do the same thing over again. These last handful of matches, he showed some different stuff, not only with Mickey van de Ven playing out at left back, but playing Kulusevski as kind of that false 9 more through the middle in a front line was also a little bit different for this game, right?
It was. Yeah, Kulusevski, like you said, played through the middle, and I was kind of surprised to see that. Not so much in the sense that, I question his capability to play through the middle because I think it's strong, but to play up top as the emphasis of the attack, right? If you can say that, it's not always so cut and dry, but I was surprised, but he did a really good job. And he's confident on the ball. He's proven that he can finish. I don't think I would ever sit here and say Kulisevsky, as a 9 going forward by any means, but he did a job at a time where someone had to do it and we didn't have many options, right? So kudos to Kulisevsky for getting it done, and as you both said, scoring a brace when very few people, I would imagine, would have expected that from him.
Yeah, I thought that there were also really good performances, kind of just all around, from guys like Madison. Sonny had a great performance as well, picked up an assist. The back line looked good. It was really, and we have to take all of it obviously with a grain of salt, being the competition was what it was, but it was really just one of those final days where I think everyone's already kind of on the plane, and obviously Spurs were on the plane shortly after to the land down under. But it was nice to not have to sweat this one out, in knowing that you needed the point for Europa League qualification and you got it pretty early on. It looked very, very comfortable throughout in this one. I heard a question posed on a different podcast earlier this week, and I want to bring it here because I think it's a really fascinating kind of discussion. But heading into next season, and look, we're gonna be back at you guys with another pod this weekend and do a lot more big picture stuff, but this is the first kind of big picture question I want to ask as we go into next season. And Caroline, I'll start with you. Europa League is secured for next season, and I'm telling you right now, Spurs are going to win the Europa League next year. Congratulations, we're lifting a trophy. How far down the table are you comfortable with Spurs finishing next season, if I can guarantee you Europa League victory?
I forgot there was going to be a question attached. I was just like, yeah, we're winning the Europa League. Let's go. Well, you know what? I don't expect us to really drop much in the table, even if we do put that much focus into one competition. I think we're going to be around that 5th, 4th mark, pretty consistently under Ange, unless we're having, a really exceptional season, which we could, depending on how summer transfer business goes. I think, needing a striker seems to be like a big issue for us. Although I will say that in these last 2 games where we kind of were playing a bit of a strikerless formation, really, we kind of saw the best out of the players that we haven't seen in a long time. So that's kind of tricky to say how important that's going to be, especially if Richarlison stays around and is still an option. I don't know. But yeah, I think that if we did go below 5th, I probably would be feeling a little disappointed, but I don't really expect that to happen. So
Don't get relegated.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like,
just don't get relegated.
17th. I'm fine with that. Yeah, I know, man.
Honestly,
I like Caroline's answer.
I don't think we can be that bad, guys. I really don't.
We won't be. But I think my point is that I don't give a shit what happens if you can give me a Europa League trophy and you're in the Premier League again the following season, and of course the Champions League, right? Then I'm a happy camper. It got me thinking, though, how crazy would it be if a team that got relegated won the Europa League and there was a championship club in the Champions League? That would just be mind bending. But let's make sure that we are not the first club to present that scenario.
It would be so incredibly Spurs for something like that to happen, I guess. But I don't. I'd have to look. In all the history of football, I'm sure something similar has happened. Maybe not in the Champions League era, but I have to imagine something of that sort has happened before. But it would be very, very strange for sure.
I know.
But I agree with Caroline. Like, it's not gonna happen. It's just, it's where we are.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm with Caroline. I mean, I think a strong finish next year from the club. I do think we'll invest in the right areas. I do think there's just 2 quick talking points too on the Sheffield match before we move on from it. I had said a couple of times on the podcast that I thought it was asinine to move Mickey Van de Ven out of his position at the left center back because he's so damn good at it. But he proved to be a really strong rotational piece to Udogie at left back, I think. 2 strong performances from him in a row where he really did a good job of getting the ball down the flank and offering plenty in the final third, which I think was a question. And I'm not saying plenty as if he was like super flashy or anything, but he was just extremely functional from the left back position in the attacking third, and of course was really strong at the back. So kudos to him. I really think that just puts more emphasis on the need to invest in another center back and keep Van de Ven, of course, as a left center back, but as a rotational piece to Udogie if Udogie needs a rest or whatever it is, right? And then I do have to give Angel a lot of credit because I had been pretty vocal about the fact that not having a target forward in this formation was going to be a challenge. And I still believe that, but Ange said, fuck it, I'll flip the script and I'll use a false nine and I'll have my wings and Son and Brennan be the tip of the spear, if you will. And they stayed, I thought, a little bit more central and high, with both instances of the false nine, be it the rotational Madison Sarr against City or Kulusevski against Sheffield. So Ange found a way to operate, I thought, really effectively without a target man. And maybe that's some of like the plan B that we've been talking about as fans, right? Is adjusting and figuring out some way to make what you have work until we can figure it out. And I thought he did a really, really good job of that. The two results, I say, even though City is not a result technically in the sense of the term, right? But these two matches in City and Sheffield, I think, saw us play in a way that was similar to how we started the season in a lot of ways, right? And it was just nice to see the team kind of figured out, even if it was at the tail end. I don't think there's anything to cry about there because we'll take the momentum into the off season and come back stronger from it. But we really needed to finish this season with a showing, right, and a bit of a bang. And if you separate the shit show that was off the field stuff against Manchester City, right, and just look at the way we played that night, and then Sheffield, I think there's a lot to be positive about as we go into next season.
I've really combed over a lot of Ange's press conferences, pre-match, post-match, all of them, and he's been asked a lot about kind of what you're just talking about, changing the style, not the style of play, changing the formation, changing, the way they go about things. And I really do get the impression, it's something we've talked about on previous podcasts, but I get the impression that he almost intentionally ran this team and, for lack of a better term, his head into a wall and said, no, this is how we're going to play, because he was hammering home fundamentals and not so much worried. Not that he wasn't worried about tactics, but he was hammering home fundamentals and ball movement and those kinds of things throughout the entire season, and kind of seeing, it's almost like he was like panning for gold. He's looking for the players who can play this style, play this up-tempo nature, and do all of this on the regular. And now we saw toward the end of the season, as you mentioned, especially in these final two matches, we saw him tweak a few things. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward into next season, because he's going to get more pieces. Basically, he's going to get more chess pieces. He's going to get, a rook and a knight and a bishop where he can do different things with them. And I think that that's like an exciting part of this summer, and seeing what incomings bring in terms of just a more dynamic nature. Like, can you occasionally throw Kulusevski in a false nine? Can you occasionally throw Van de Ven out at left back if you need, something a little bit more defensive that offers something a little different? I do think that there's a lot that can be gained from him, at least he's still learning about these players. I think we forget that a long, painful rebuild means a long, painful rebuild. And it's like, this has been 1 year of him learning all of this. And to your point, I think that a lot of what he did down the stretch that fans took issue with is going to pay off in the long run, because of, what he was able to gain in terms of learning who can do what. And, you bring up the Van de Ven thing. I don't love Van de Ven at left back. I'd much rather have him at left center back. But in this kind of situation down the stretch where you literally don't have another left back available to play, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with seeing what he can do there. And hell, if you look at the one goal, I think it was the first goal that was created in this Sheffield United game, it was created by Van de Ven being down on that left flank and pressing and creating a turnover and filtering the ball forward. And that doesn't happen if he's playing at left center back. He's not in that position on the pitch. So these are things that he's learning about, that we're learning about, and seeing these players in his system. And I don't know. It's hard to say that this was a bad season or a bad finish because of what we learned about this guy. And again, I'm not trying to get too big picture about it, but it just, to your point, these slight changes, I think, are a real, they open up a lot for me in terms of seeing what this guy can do. He's not a one trick pony, and never did I really think he was, but you're starting to see some of the different things that he's able to do. And I think that excites me going into the off season.
Yeah, I fully agree. Oh, go ahead, Caroline.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that a lot of the times this season when we've seen and get a little more creative has been kind of enforced situations, like with the injuries. But at the same time, I feel like the players have responded really well in those occasions. Especially if you look at a player like Van de Ven, he seemed to be playing at left back with a lot of like freedom and joy. Like that's the only way I can describe it. And so I think, it's obviously not ideal that we lost Udogie for the last, home stretch of the season. But to see another player get a chance to kind of, add another element to their game and have like a fresh challenge in a season where, I think things were kind of getting frustrating to a certain extent, with the formation, of course, staying the same largely. And the players, I think some of them who were, not in form, which I'm not including Van de Ven in that category, but, I think just having a little bit of that change was something that we really needed at the end of the season. And like you said, it bodes well going into the next year that if we do get into these kind of situations again, where we have heavy injuries, which God forbid, I hope that doesn't happen again. We know that we have some creative solutions in the squad. And, like you said, Ange is not a one trick pony. Like he's going to be able to figure it out. So yeah, I felt very encouraged by these last two games, even the City game,
Yeah, I completely agree with all that, Caroline. And I also think what Ange is doing when he's looking at these kinds of options, like a Van de Ven out wide, or any other rotational piece, Kulusevski through the middle, I think where he's increasing his ability to get people minutes. And that's really important, right? And not just people minutes, but his super talented players. We're going to bring in another center back, right? I do think you could look at Udogie, Porro, Romero, and Van de Ven as your back line for the next 5 years. Realistically, if you were able to keep those guys engaged in the project for that long, right? They're all young enough to be a back line together for quite some time, which is exciting. But you're going to have rotational pieces, right? And I think the more you keep that core on the field whenever possible, right, you're going to be better for it too. And so I really think Ange is starting to explore some of that stuff too as we approach the transfer season and the need to bolster the squad. I think there's center backs that we're hearing right now. I don't think it's this Caliaforio guy from Genoa at this point. I think he goes straight to Juventus with his manager. They announced that today, but we're going to bring in some sort of talent, right, that's capable of playing numerous positions along the back line. And I think that seems to be a staple in the Ange Postecoglou ethos of the team that he builds, right, or of his team building, rather.
Yeah, and to that note, I thought it was good that we got to see Radu Dragusin get some consistent minutes at the end of this season. And we weren't seeing him in his favored position either. We know he prefers to play on the right side. And I felt like he still did a very capable job on the left. So again, like you said, players who do have that little bit of versatility to them are going to be really important. And I know there were kind of some rumblings about, is Dragusin even going to be happy staying in this team? But to me, that didn't look like a player who was not bought into the project. So
yeah,
I enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, fully agree. He deserves his flowers. He was really good in both of those matches, and it's almost as if players need more than 5 training sessions to be ready to perform well in the system, right? But who would have thought such a thing? But no, I really think he deserves a lot of praise for the way that he came in and just did a phenomenal job, both on the ball, off the ball. Him and Romero paired well together. He's never usurping big Mickey ever, right? But he'll be a very viable option when he needs to be, for sure, and that's super exciting.
The depth is obviously going to be super important as well going forward, adding European football to the calendar. And just a reminder, it's 8 group stage games next season, not the typical 6. A totally new format for both the Europa League and the Champions League. And I assume the Conference League, although I hope I don't ever have to think about the Conference League anymore going forward. That would be wonderful if I didn't. So yeah, it's definitely something to think about. And they're definitely going to be rumors flying, which we will, I guess, begin to discuss this coming weekend. But we're going to put it off at least for this episode in terms of getting real in depth on the transfer business. But
I'll be ready. Don't you worry.
I trust me. I know you will. Guys, we alluded to it, but Spurs did jet off to Melbourne and played this postseason friendly match against Newcastle, a match that finished 1-1 after the 90 minutes, and then Spurs went on to lose 5-4 in penalties. Obviously, none of that really matters. Apparently, everyone came out of it healthy. James Maddison scored a nifty little goal. Cool. Thumbs up. Brian Hill missed a penalty. That was the decider. Honestly, there's not much else to be said about this game. There were more than 78,000 people showed up for it to watch this match in Melbourne, which is obviously kind of the most important thing. It's a marketing effort for the club, and the people showed up for it, which again is nice. But I think we're all kind of on the same page that this was awkward and this was not ideal, especially when you're talking about a summer that has the Euros, it has the Copa America, it has, just all kinds of other football that's going to be happening. These guys are not going to get a lot of time off. And sure, it's a one-off and it happened 2 or 3 days after the season. I don't even know how you equate that with the time change, but I don't really know what else there is to say other than cool. Like 2 thumbs up that everyone's healthy. Like, do you guys have anything to offer on this? Because I'm ready to just forget it ever happened and hope that I don't have to criticize the club for this kind of bullshit going forward.
Yeah, I will say shout out to the A Bit Spursy Discord. Lots of Australians in that chat, and they were, obviously watching the game in real time while the rest of us in other parts of the world were asleep. I did not watch this game, but they kind of gave me the impression that, the game was not the most entertaining as far as, a Spurs versus Newcastle game could be. They said, it looked like both teams were very clearly like in energy preservation mode, avoiding injury mode, which doesn't really track with what Postecoglou said in his post game, but whatever. But I will say the one maybe positive thing about it, which is also a bad thing, is that the academy kids, a lot of them got to go. They seem like they had a great time, so that's cool. The bad thing is that they have a final on Sunday. So I'm not sure it was like the wisest move to send them, across the world and back in the space of like 4 days ahead of a final for a cup. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, for every problem and this issue or whatever word we want to use for what we've seen with the decision to fly over there, I do think there's one really positive takeaway, and that's just the experience for all those fans that got to meet some of their heroes. And it's a lot to ask of the boys for sure, but those are experiences that I've been fortunate to have myself, right? And meeting Mauricio Pochettino was one of, I'm going to say his name again, it was, one of the coolest experiences of my life. And if the club doesn't make the effort to do those types of things, then people don't get to have those experiences, right? And I think for us fans who are on the other side of the globe and don't always feel like super connected to our club, I think the opportunity to be able to feel that physical presence of the club you support and love so much is really awesome. So I'm really happy for all those fans. You know, less excited for the boys and everybody who had to travel, right? But I'm super stoked for all those fans. Looks like they had a great time too.
Yeah, no question. It's awkward. I don't mind the preseason tours, and obviously Spurs are going to be doing that again as well. They're going to be going to South Korea and I think elsewhere in Asia as well. I haven't
Japan too.
Japan. Okay, yeah,
Mhm.
I know they have. Don't they have 2 preseason matches against Bayern scheduled? One is in I think South Korea, and one at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, which is also going to give us a lot to discuss here on the podcast. But it's very there's a lot going into all the travel and everything. And like I said, I don't mind the preseason tour. You're building up to something, but coming down from a season that just ended, especially when a lot of these guys, not all of them, but many of them are going to be going off and playing internationally in what are massive competitions this summer. It leaves a bad taste for me, but I agree with you, Scott. It's like good for the fans to get a chance to go out and see a match in as the season kind of comes to a close. So that is what it is. The season also came to a close for Spurs women this weekend. They got themselves a 3-1 victory over West Ham United. Three, I thought, really cool goals, especially the last one coming off the foot of Drew Spence. Just an absolute scorcher of a goal. But Caroline, take us through this one, because this was obviously a match that I won't say didn't mean anything, but in terms of the actual table, everything was set there. This was not much more than a kick and giggle, to be perfectly honest, but Spurs women do go out and get the victory over West Ham and, finish the season on a really strong note.
Yeah, I mean, both of these teams, we already knew where we were going to be in the table, so there wasn't any real jeopardy to the game. But I do feel like, both teams really gave it their all. Especially from the Tottenham perspective, we created a lot of chances. I thought that to score so early, it really felt like this had the potential to be another really high scoring game, like we saw the last time we played them, and that crazy wind game, which was wild.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it did feel like we could have scored more, and at the same time, even when West Ham got their goal, I didn't feel like there was any question of us winning the game eventually. Because West Ham's goal was kind of just one of those where it's like a really low probability chance that they took and it went in. But other than that, they really didn't create a whole lot. And like you said, Andrew, all 3 goals that Spurs scored were just fabulous goals, like fit for the big occasion at the big stadium, I felt like. And Jess Naz, I feel like I rave about her every episode, but I'm going to do it again because she had a goal and an assist off the bench. And it just feels like this has really been her true breakout season. And I just can't wait to see what she does next year, honestly, because it feels like she's really added so many new elements to her game. And then for Drew to get that goal at the very end was, I think, also very nice for her because she's had kind of a tough season in terms of having that really long injury layoff. And since she came back, I feel like she's been really important. So she's somebody who, I think she has an option on her contract for next year. And I'm hoping that we, go ahead and exercise it because I think she's really important to our midfield.
I don't think there's any doubt that Jess Naz would be the Spurs' most improved player if there were such a thing that they were going to give that out. I'm curious as to who both of you guys think would be the player of the season for Spurs women. We talked a lot about it on the men's side, and there were many differing opinions from Romero to Sonny to Van de Ven. Porro, I think it's a shout. Vicario, but there's also, I think, a few different names you could bring up on the side of Spurs women. I think Martha Thomas would get a shout. I think Grace Clinton would obviously get a shout. Where do you guys land after seeing the whole of the season on the player of the season for this team?
I'm gonna go with Becky Spencer. Actually, I think that she had moments where she stood on her head. I mean, she got us to a cup final, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. And I think she was just an absolute presence for a team that was really taking shape. I mean, a lot of changes last summer, right? From the manager itself to the squad from top to bottom. So yeah, I'm gonna give it to the keeper.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go in the opposite direction though with a new player because for me it has to be Martha. Like she really came through for us as a brand new player to the side when we needed a goal scorer in Beth England's absence. You know, since she missed like the entire first half of the season basically. Um, she really surprised me. Like personally, I was not that excited about her signing, and she just came in and was like, "This is what I can do." And I think what I really enjoyed the most about her is just like her versatility. I feel like she scored every kind of goal possible this season, and she's also contributed quite a few assists as well. And then, of course, you know, having goals in those really like huge moments, like winning the North London Derby at home at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, that was absolutely massive. Getting the game winner against Leicester to get us to the final. So it's got to be Martha for me.
Yeah, no argument for me by any means.
I think I don't have an argument with either. I think I just want to shout out Grace Clinton again, just because I really want her to stay. That's like my main goal, and I know it's the club's main goal as well.
Please stay, Grace, if you're listening.
Please, and I think if you asked her, maybe she would want to, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough negotiation with United for that to happen, but we'll kind of see how that comes through. I know there's a lot of reports flying out there that Spurs are going to be like right on it. Right as the window opens, they're going to start trying to bang down that door and make it happen. So that would be really cool to come through.
Yeah, I completely agree. And on the topic of Martha Thomas, I think the only other shout from the match was that Beth and Martha were on the field together for a little while we were super functional. And I think that is a very good thing. There's no other way to put it, right? I think anytime you can get both of your top talents on the field, you should, first of all, right? So, and I won't say a bad thing about Robert at all, right? He's done a fantastic job, but you got to figure out how to get your best two players on the field at the same time. And we saw a glimpse of that in this match, and I thought that was really positive. But honestly, the women's team is just fantastic. I look at the men's team and the women's team as twins, right? And you've got one that's just pretty cool, but kind of a pain in the ass and just pisses you off a little bit, right? And acts as a shit show here and there. And then you've got one that's just an absolute golden child and perfect in everything that they're doing. And I think that's the women's team right now. So they were
maybe not perfect.
I was going to say, let's be careful. They finished sixth in a 12-team league. It was an improvement on last season, just like the men's team. But I want us to be able to criticize when necessary, and there were spots where we can.
We'll say this: you got one of your twins that tries their ass off and gives their heart in every single thing that they do, and one that maybe doesn't always do that, right? So, yeah, I really appreciate what the women's team did this year, and I appreciate what they were this year, which was like a nice, calming, like base presence for a season that on the other side of the club was a little bit tumultuous at times, I think.
Yeah, it was a sixth place finish, 4 points behind Manchester United for fifth, 10 points behind Liverpool for fourth. So the gap is still quite there, but I am confident that with the summer window, and honestly, you bringing up the Martha Thomas Beth England thing is interesting for me too, because obviously trying to mesh those two on the pitch at the same time had to be done mid-season. It's not like Robert got a preseason to be able to work that out, because Beth was still coming back from the injury. So I'm excited to see what he comes up with going into next season to get both of them humming, because if you've got two really good goal scorers, you have something to work with in the WSL. And I think that Spurs' goal next season should definitely be for that top three finish. And I don't think that's too ambitious either, because when you have, like I say, two goal scorers that you can figure out how to get them both cooking at the same time, and you've got a summer window to bolster, and hopefully Grace Clinton coming back, and just more reinforcements, I do think that this is a team that could make a leap. I mean, we saw the leap they made just this season from let's not forget 11th all the way up to 6th. Why couldn't they jump another 5 spots, and jump up into the Champions League discussion? I don't think it's out of the question.
Yeah, I don't either, because I just think that in general the WSL is becoming more competitive, because you see it the opposite way as well. You just mentioned that we finished 4 points behind United. This was the team that finished second place last year.
Yep.
So you can't take anything for granted in this league anymore. And I mean, as Americans, we are all very interested in Emma Hayes, coming to the U.S. women's national team. Chelsea, we don't know what they're going to look like without her. Probably still really good because they've got a stacked squad, but you never know. Like, leadership really is important. And, sometimes the manager can be that X factor that's holding everything together perfectly. So we'll see. And
Yeah.
I think there are other teams too that, Arsenal are starting to stumble a bit. Man City took a while to get into the season, but finished really strong, even without, Bunny Shaw at the end. So it's all to play for. And I feel like it says something that Robert Villaham has been very open the entire time he's been here about how that is his goal for next year. Like, he's not mincing words. He's like, no, we're going for Champions League qualification next season. And he has a plan to get there in terms of, our transfer targets. Like, we know he's already working on that behind the scenes. So I like to see the ambition. It's something that we've been asking for a long time now for this team. So it's all good.
Yeah, well said. It just hit me that as fans of Spurs Women and the U.S. Women's National Team, we can now be like super Emma Hayes fans with no remorse or regret, which is an awesome feeling. But no, I also think that, as we're talking about Beth and Martha, that's a really exciting strike partnership. I think in a lot of ways, tactically, as far as their ability goes, I think you can do a lot. And I honestly got goosebumps for a second thinking of what that partnership could look like. It could be deadly. I almost wonder if we'll see, a front two next year at times. I think if you look at Jess Naz, you have a very capable right mid, right? Somebody who can tear up the flank, I think, and become like an attacking forward, right, from the right side. I don't know if you have anyone that quite does that on the left, but I think you play Grace Clinton out there if she's still around, and she can operate as, a playmaking midfielder off the flank. And you've got Suminen, and you've got Vinberg, and you've got Drew Spence, of course. And you've got some really capable midfielders that could form an interesting pivot. So I have no idea. Red and Robert Villaham has forgotten more than I'll ever know, but it'll be interesting to see what he does next year, with a full preseason with his squad, right? It's going to be exciting.
Well, listen, before we get out of here, you guys brought up Emma Hayes departing Chelsea. Let's talk about the other manager that's, for some fucking reason, departing Chelsea. Scott, do you have any mea culpa to offer on Mauricio Pochettino's departure from Chelsea? No,
I think we should bring him back right now.
To do what exactly?
To manage the team. Let's go. No, I'm kidding. I really wouldn't trade Postecoglou for anybody right now. But yeah, that Chelsea's a shit show, right? Pochettino's a good manager. He, in my opinion, Pochettino did what no one else could possibly have done with that squad, right? And we all know he's a specialist at getting young guys to bond together, and that's kind of his sweet spot. So yeah, Chelsea's just in absolute chaos as an organization, and I laugh and I smile because it's just such a wonderful thing.
Let me present it this way: if let's say Postecoglou has a 6-year run here and wins a couple trophies, maybe doesn't win the Premier League, but wins a Europa League, wins an FA Cup. Is there any future for Pochettino to ever come back to this club after this year?
Yeah, that's when you bring him back right after that.
What about for you, Caroline? I know I shouldn't have asked Scott this question. Caroline, I know his answer. What about for you? Because I think that this sullied him for me a little bit. I really do think so.
Yeah, this is something I don't like about myself, but I do hold grudges. It would be hard for me to welcome him back with open arms, which, I mean, like, I'll be honest, like, the day he got sacked, I felt like someone was ripping my heart out, and I hadn't even been a fan of the team that long. So, that just goes to show like how sort of devoted we were, as a fan base to him. And I have seen a lot of people saying, all is forgiven. Thanks for the sabotage job at Chelsea, which I don't think that's what it was, honestly. I think they just, like you said, are a horribly ran organization, and long may it continue for our sake. But yeah, I don't know.
I mean, they finished quite literally 3 points behind Spurs this year, and with a better goal differential. Like, they weren't awful. They were awful. They closed the season on an absolute tear.
Dude, I think statistically from Boxing Day forward, they took it was only City and Arsenal that took more points than them in the calendar year 2024 portion of the Premier League season. So yeah, I mean, they went on an absolute tear, and that was Pochettino. Let's remove like my bit about Pochettino from all of this. He did a very good job. And for them to decide that it was the right move to part ways with him is honestly a mind-bending decision. And that is not coming from a place of bias. That is just coming from a place of pure logic and reason. And I couldn't tell you why they decided to do that. There's talks of them talking to McKenna, that guy that just got Ipswich from League Two to the Premier League in 2 years, right? Or sorry, League One to the Premier League in 2 seasons, which is mind-bending as well. I've been using that word quite a bit tonight. So he seems to be a real talent, and there is grumblings that Chelsea's in conversation with him. Be a bummer for Ipswich, but he has to know he's absolutely on toast when it comes to the Premier League competition with the squad that he has. But it would still be a bummer. So I hope it's not the case, but you also hope there's like some reason why they decided to part ways with Pochettino.
Well, it sounds like he kind of agreed that it should happen. Like I don't think that, like, maybe culturally it wasn't a good fit. I don't know, but I will say one thing about Chelsea that scares me is that Christopher Nkunku barely played this season. And when he is fit next season, yeah, I'm concerned.
I feel like it would have been much worse if Pochettino had been successful at Chelsea. It would have made it much harder for me to potentially down the road accept him back. But even though he wasn't successful at Chelsea, I still am feeling very much like I still need a lot of space and a lot of distance from it. It's very awkward. I personally think Chelsea would do well to just hire Thomas Tuchel or Frank Lampard or just go down that road again personally. But I don't make the decisions over there. I think they'd be great. Just give me another retread. Let's run it back. Let's try it again. Cause I don't want to see that team, hire an up and coming manager that actually has success for sure. And obviously I'm not going to get into Bayern cause I don't want to drag Caroline through that as we're trying to wind down this pod, but Thomas Tuchel would fit right back in at Chelsea like a glove, I think, and that would make her very happy. So, right?
Well, they shouldn't have let him go in the first place, and I think a lot of their fans knew that, so they would welcome him back. I guarantee you.
Yeah,
and we'll they can have him. Yeah, he's bye.
Yeah, exactly. So. Lots of moving and shaking to happen. I think that's all we've got this week. We're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be back at the weekend to kind of do some more big picture, wrapping up the season type of stuff. But I think that's a good place to leave it for this week. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow us at Tottenham Depot. Check out our episodes on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Tottenham Depot. And leave us a rating and review on your podcast app of choice, because that really does help spread the word about the show. You can follow us on the socials at Tottenham Depot. You can follow Caroline at CG Stefko, follow Scott at Scott G Bird, and follow me at A Stedka. We will be back with you guys at the weekend. We'll talk to you then. Until then, this has been the Tottenham Depot podcast. As always, come on, you Spurs.